That night, I heard someone call my name, even though I was certain I was completely alone in that house. I can still remember the cold shiver crawling down my spine when the voice echoed a second time, closer, clearer, and filled with the desperate plea of a soul trapped for decades. The old house I had entered merely out of curiosity quickly turned into a maze of whispers, fleeting shadows, and doors slamming shut without any reason. I didn't know what I had awakened, but I knew one thing for sure: whatever it was, it never intended to let me leave. I still remember the very first moment I saw that wooden puppet. The ceiling light cast a dim glow over its massive body, making every grain of wood look like human flesh slowly rotting away. Its head was round like a bowling ball, with 5 holes carved into it, deep, black, and cold, like the empty sockets of the dead who never had a chance to move on. I had no idea what I was looking at, some grotesque display piece, or a corpse imprisoned inside wood, but one thing was undeniable. The thing sitting in front of me knew I was looking at it. Everything began on the night Danny, the poor woman, died in her own mansion. Danny hadn't lived there long. The house was so large that every step she took echoed like someone else was walking right behind her. I always felt as if she was living with someone or something else, even if she didn't dare admit it. Her husband, Thet, kept working night shifts at the psychiatric hospital, leaving her alone with cold walls and darkness that hung in the air like poisonous mist. That night, Donnie stepped outside to look for her phone. I can imagine what she felt: the damp, chill, the suffocating darkness curling in front of her like the tongue of a beast tasting its prey. When she returned, a man appeared outside her door, breathless, panicked, voice trembling with desperation. "There's someone inside your house, don't go in." If I were her, I wouldn't have believed him either. A filthy stranger, looking like an escaped mental patient, standing in the dark, speaking in broken, strangled words. How could anyone trust him? Donnie trembled, but assumed he was delusional. She had no idea that this man had tried to save her for the last time. The next morning, they found Danny's body. Her face was covered by her hair, her body collapsed beside her front door, as if she had tried to run away from something far worse than darkness. The man who warned her, Oren, became the only suspect. But since he was a psychiatric patient, no one charged him. They simply sent him back to the hospital, shut the case, and pretended everything was over. But I knew nothing was over. A year later, on Danny's death anniversary, a new case emerged. Another patient, Houston, heard crying in the night. When he crawled out from under his bed, he saw Oren's prosthetic eye lying in a pool of blood. Oren's body had been twisted and mangled, crushed into something almost unrecognizable as human. A corpse folded in ways a human body should never bend. And at that moment, I thought of the wooden puppet. Why? Because Houston had drawn the creature that attacked Oren, and the figure looked exactly like the thing sitting in front of me now. The next day, Thet, Donnie's husband, met her twin sister, Dossie. She was blind, but capable of seeing the memories of the dead through touch. I still remember the first time she removed her gloves. Her hands were pale, the fingers long and freezing cold, so cold I believe they had touched more corpses than living people. When she touched Oren's prosthetic eye, her entire body trembled. She saw everything. She saw Danny facing the masked killer on the night she died. She saw Oren running in terror, trying to warn her. She saw Ivan, Thet's nurse, standing beside Thet in a locked room, discussing how to kill Danny to steal her house and money. She saw Donnie curled up in her tent, unaware that the killer was right behind the thin fabric. When Dossie opened her eyes, even though those eyes no longer saw anything, I could feel her rage spilling from her body. She immediately returned to her shop, knelt before a large wooden crate. I'll never forget that moment, Daisy trembling as she recited ancient chants, calling to a forgotten soul, awakening something that had been sleeping within the wood. A ritual of vengeance had begun. The wooden puppet, whose name I later became too terrified to speak, awoke. When the crate was delivered to Thet's home, Jenna, his new girlfriend, opened it and saw the puppet. She had no idea Danny once had the exact same body type, tall, thin, blonde. It was as if the puppet had been shaped in the image of its first victim, or perhaps Danny was still inside it. Dining table, wooden floor, dim yellow light, the smell of cold food. But when Danny's camera was switched back on, Jenna nearly fainted. In the final footage Donnie ever recorded, a pale face wearing a mask was sitting inside the tent, right behind her, completely unnoticed. The shot was slow, accidental, as though Danny had unknowingly invited death into the frame for the very last time. Then midnight came. Jenna panicked and fled the room, rushing into the kitchen to grab a knife, but the mansion suddenly lost power. I can picture the sound of metal hitting the floor, her breathing breaking into frantic gasps. A door slammed open, cold wind rushed in, and Danny's pale face emerged from the darkness. Jenna screamed until her voice cracked, bolted into her car, and drove for miles. And Thet? He returned to the mansion, believing he'd find answers. But what waited for him was darkness, the creaking of wood, and the wooden puppet staring straight at him. I still remember the moment I stepped into that dark room at the end of the hallway, a place where, the instant the door closed behind me, it felt as if the entire world outside had been cut off. No more wind, no more raindrops tapping against the roof like when I first entered the house. Only one sound remained soft, very soft, like the faint breathing of something hiding in the corner, patiently watching my every move. I didn't know what it was. I only knew it wasn't human. The damp, moldy smell and the cold creeping up my spine made me shiver. But the more I tried to step back, the more it felt like an invisible force was pushing me deeper inside, as if someone was standing right behind me whispering, "Go on, you can't stop now." I tried to steady my breathing, but every cell in my body stretched thin, ready to snap. In the corner of the room was an old wooden wardrobe, its door hanging crooked, as if someone had yanked it violently. From the gap, a cold breath leaked out, carrying the scent of wet earth and something faintly metallic, making me shudder without meaning to. I moved closer, each step heavy, like someone was pulling me backward. My heart hammered violently, half wanting to flee, half compelled to open that wardrobe and see what was waiting inside. Some part of me knew this was the key to understanding everything happening in this house. When my fingers touched the icy handle, goosebumps rippled across my skin. The wardrobe let out a long, aching groan as I pulled the door open a crack, just wide enough for me to see the pitch-black void inside, dark as the throat of a bottomless creature. But right then, I heard a soft click behind me, like nails tapping on the wooden floor. I froze. I didn't dare turn around, didn't dare breathe too hard. I forced myself to believe it was just the wind, but this room had no wind. I knew that with absolute certainty. When I finally turned, what I saw wasn't a person, not even a clear shape, but a thick, heavy patch of darkness collecting itself into the outline of a body that shouldn't exist. The darkness moved like dense smoke, sliding slowly toward me. I stumbled backward by instinct, but the wardrobe behind me suddenly swung wide open, as if something inside had pulled it. A rush of cold air slammed into the back of my neck, and I could feel it. Something standing right behind me. A long, wet breath brushed against my skin, and my knees went weak. I didn't dare turn around, because if I did, I might see the face of whatever had been trapped in that wardrobe for years. Or perhaps it had never been trapped at all. Maybe it had just been waiting for a fool to open the door for it. And in that moment, a horrifying realization struck me. The thing in the wardrobe and the shadow in the room were not two separate entities. They were one. It had been stalking me from the very moment I stepped foot into this house. Every sound I'd heard, the breathing, the scraping, the footsteps following me, had all belonged to it. And now, with me standing exactly where it wanted, it began to manifest more clearly in the dim light leaking through the doorframe. The first thing I saw were its fingers, unnaturally long, twisted like they'd been broken and healed wrong 100 times. They crawled along the floor, scraping the wood with a shrill, bone-deep screech. Then I saw its body, thin to the point of deformity, skin ash gray, stretched over veins black, and knotted like the roots of a dying tree. Finally, I saw its face, or where a face should have been. 2 hollow pits, dark as the bottom of a well, and a mouth torn open from ear to ear, stretched as if someone had forced it to widen in ways no living creature should endure. That mouth curled upward into something resembling a smile. But nothing on earth could ever be called a smile. I spun around and bolted out of the room. But the hallway suddenly stretched longer, much longer. I ran and ran, yet the other end never came closer. The walls seemed to shift inward, closing around me, forcing me back toward the thing I was trying desperately to escape. The paintings on the walls, portraits of those who once lived here, began to distort, their faces elongated, eyes wide, mouths twisted as if screaming silently. I knew it wasn't a hallucination. They were trying to warn me, but it was already too late. When I finally reached for the door at the end of the hall, it slammed shut violently. A powerful force hurled me backward toward the dimly flickering yellow light. I crawled up, gasping for air. The shadow, that monstrous thing, now stood right in front of me, It no longer moved slowly like it did in the room. This time, it stepped forward deliberately, letting me hear every crack of its bones as they shifted with each movement. Then I understood. It didn't want to kill me quickly. It wanted me to see, to know, to understand that I was the next person destined to be trapped in this house, just like all the others who had vanished before. I screamed and lunged for the door again, pulling with every ounce of strength I had left. This time, it burst open, and I fell into the larger hallway. I don't know how far I ran, or how many dark rooms I stumbled past. Only when daylight finally struck my eyes did I realize I had made it outside. I collapsed onto the damp ground, breath ragged, body shaking like someone who had just narrowly escaped death. But then, I heard it. The old wooden door behind me creaked open. There was no wind. No one else was there. But the door opened anyway, slowly, deliberately, as if it knew I would turn around. As if it wanted me to see that the shadow was still standing there in the doorway, watching me with its hollow, endless eyes and that torn, gaping mouth. And then, it smiled. A smile identical to the distorted grins on the portraits in the hallway. A smile that told me, with absolute certainty, that my escape was only the beginning. I no longer remember how long I sat in front of that house. When I escaped, I thought everything was over, that as long as I walked far enough from that doorway, everything would fade away like a winter nightmare. But the longer I sat there, the more I realized something. The fear never left me. It clung to me like a long, heavy shadow. No matter how far I went, it always fell at my feet, whispering that I hadn't truly escaped. I stood up, trying to calm myself by scanning the area around me. The house sat at the end of an old dirt path, flanked by twisted trees that looked like shriveled hands, reaching for anyone who passed by. The sky was overcast, the clouds so low I felt I could touch them from the porch. I told myself I needed to leave immediately, but the sense of a gaze burning into the back of my neck kept me from turning around. I walked quickly. But after only a few steps, a soft sound came from behind me. A sound that made every hair on my body stand straight. The house's door slowly closing. Not from the wind, but as if someone were gently pushing it, softly, carefully, trying not to alert me. I held my breath. I didn't turn around. Then the door made one final click, a complete, deliberate closure. I knew exactly what it meant. It closed that way to tell me it would open again, when I returned. When I left that place, I thought I had won. I went home to my small apartment, shut every door, pulled every curtain, turned on every light, trying to create the brightest space possible. But the brighter the room became, the darker the shadows inside me grew. That night, sitting alone, I felt the same cold breath at my back. At first I tried convincing myself I was just exhausted, that everything I experienced was merely imagination feeding fear. But then I noticed something that made my heart tighten. The mirror on the wall in front of me reflected a dark patch behind me that should have been brightly lit, and within that darkness stood a figure. I whipped my head around. No one. But in the mirror, the shadow remained frozen like a silhouette nailed to the floor. I squinted, trying to make out the faint shape. Then, the shadow moved. Slowly, but enough for me to see each unsettling shift, as if someone was crawling out of a place they didn't belong. I turned to look directly. Nothing. But in the mirror, the shadow was walking toward me. My body jolted. I jumped to my feet, breath fractured. I rushed to the mirror and yanked the curtain over it. The moment it was covered, a soft chuckle brushed the back of my neck. So quiet, anyone else would mistake it for a draft. But I knew better. It was the laugh of whatever had followed me from that house. I turned. Nothing. Then, the ceiling light flickered. One bulb burst with a sharp pop, dimming the room slightly. I backed away, feeling something standing too close, so close I could feel its icy breath on my skin. Small sounds began to fill the room. Long fingernails scraping the floor, something metallic dragging, a sigh echoing right beside my ear. I knew those sounds. They were the same ones I heard behind me in that dark room of the house. I turned on the bedside lamp, then the kitchen light, then the bathroom light. I turned on everything. But this time, the light didn't comfort me. It didn't push the darkness back. It only made its shadow on the wall clearer. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, even for 1 second, I saw its face. The torn mouth, the warped smile, the bottomless eye sockets. But now the face wasn't blurry or distant. It was vivid, as if it were standing directly in front of me, wanting me to memorize every grotesque detail, The next morning, I decided to tell everything to my closest friend Min, the one who trusted logic more than superstition. He didn't believe in ghosts. Everything had a scientific explanation, he said, but when he saw how drained I was, he agreed to come check my apartment. When Min stepped inside, he froze immediately. Not from shock, not from exhaustion, but because he saw something only I had seen before. The shadow on the wall. It had no source of light. It appeared on its own, completely separate from every object in the room. Min stared at it and asked, "Jang, whose shadow is that?" I swallowed. "Not mine." Min stepped back, eyes locked on the shape. We stood side by side, but the shadow stood in front of us. Then it moved. Min cursed, but before either of us reacted, the shadow extended one long arm toward him. Its fingertips nearly grazed his face when the ceiling light suddenly went pitch black. In the darkness, I heard Min scream, then silence. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, scanned the room. Nothing. No Min. The door wasn't opened. The window wasn't opened. No running footsteps. No sound at all. He vanished like he had never existed. And when my light fell on the far wall, I saw the shadow. It wasn't alone this time. It tilted its head, watching me, and next to it, another shadow had appeared. Mince. My vision blurred. My body collapsed. I don't know how long I was out. When I opened my eyes, the sky outside had turned as dark as night. Wind whistled through the cracks in the door. And then, footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps right beside my bed. I turned my head. A hand was reaching out from under the bed. Not a human hand, its fingers were long, twisted, clawed, scraping deep lines into the floor as it grabbed my ankle. I kicked free and ran. I flung open the door and froze. Outside wasn't my apartment hallway. It was the hallway of that house. The warped portraits, the damp walls, the flickering yellow light. I was back, not by choice, by its choice. When I turned around, the last thing I saw was that torn mouth stretching wide as if to swallow every sound from the world. And I understood. I never escaped. The moment I opened that wardrobe door, I became its property. And now, it wants me to see the final truth. Not everyone who goes missing in that house is gone. Some of them are still there, in the portraits on the walls, and I am about to be the next. Even after everything ended, I often found myself wondering, was what I experienced merely coincidence? Or was it a warning the house wanted to send to anyone foolish enough to step into its domain? There are still nights when I jolt awake, feeling as though someone is standing at the foot of my bed. The damp, moldy smell of that old room, the heavy footsteps pressing onto rotten wooden floors, and the invisible gaze watching me. Sometimes they return with such clarity that it's hard to believe I left that place long ago. I've come to understand one thing. There are secrets that should never be unearthed, and there are places that were never meant for human presence. What haunts me isn't just fear, it's the realization that I crossed a boundary I was never supposed to touch. The greatest lesson I learned is this: curiosity is a double-edged sword. It can lead you to the truth, but sometimes the truth is something you should never know. Rumors, legends, old tales that seem absurd, they all come from somewhere. And sometimes, the price you pay to uncover that truth is far too great. If you're watching this video, I want to ask you one thing. Do you have the courage to face the truth hidden behind the darkness? Or will you run from it, just like I once did? If you want me to tell more horrifying stories, don't forget to leave a comment and hit subscribe so you won't miss any of the nightmares waiting ahead.